Well, hello there. I'm the old Growler. The following is an interview I had with Peter Egelston, head of the Portsmouth Brewing Company in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, on 29 May 2023, Labor Day. It was an interesting interview in the fact the topic was sustainability. Enjoy. And one. Okay, Pete LaFrance here, and the old Growler, and we are in Portsmouth Brewing Company, Portsmouth Brewery?
Portsmouth Brewery.
Well, the Portsmouth Brewery in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and we are talking to Peter Egelston, who runs the place, and we're going to be talking about the Farm to Table. If you would describe the Farm to Table program here at Portsmouth.
I guess it's probably an overstatement to say it's a program, because that implies that it's actually more organized than it really is. We've been buying from local producers for many years. We never really advertise ourselves as a farm-to-table restaurant, in part because the local producers really aren't able to supply us with all of our needs. So we use them really, obviously, to support the local farm economy is an important part of it, partly because of the quality of the product that we can get from them, and partly because I think people really enjoy the story, knowing that what they're eating is coming from close to home. And it's not really just farms, for example. We switched, we sell a lot of, as you can imagine, in a brew pub, we sell a lot of fish and chips and fish sandwiches. And, oh golly, I want to say it must have been at least 10 years ago or so, we moved away from haddock, which is kind of the traditional fish for, frankly, I think it's for fish for people who don't really like fish. And we switched to pollock, which is a locally caught fish. A lot of New Englanders who consider themselves fish experts just by virtue of the fact that they're born in New England traditionally have turned their nose up at pollock. It's actually a really, really great fish. And we've had great success with it. It's sustainably harvested. It is the price and the quality don't fluctuate. It's pretty consistent month in and month out, unlike haddock, which gets, can be problematic sometimes. And so our outreach to local production goes beyond just produce, for example. Mm-hmm. We buy, when we do a chicken special that involves whole chickens or cut up chickens, we buy them from a local producer. And that's only something that's become relatively recently available, because in the past, something like chicken, it was really impractical for local growers to grow chickens and sell them commercially, because they needed to be processed through a USD-approved production facility. But as the demand for that has grown, so has the availability of those kind of products. So we've seen over the last 25, 30 years a lot more options for restaurants like ours that want to buy local and support the local farm economy. It's pretty cool. I know that was a short question you asked, and I gave a very long answer.
That's quite all right.
Hopefully I didn't suck all the air out of the room.
No, not at all. What effect has the program? What effect does this have on your menu planning?
That's a good question, because I'll give you a good example. And we're not doing it right now. Unfortunately, the pandemic for a lot of businesses and a lot of people kind of turned everything a bit off kilter. but leading up to the pandemic, we were signed up for a commercial CSA. So every once a week, the farmer that we subscribed to would bring in a couple of big boxes. But we never really knew what was going to be in the box from one week to the next. I mean, it wasn't a total crapshoot,
Right.
But it varied. So it required the crew in the kitchen to be able to improvise. They really enjoyed that. They got a kick out of it, you know, and it may have meant that the accompanying vegetable for our center of the plate item might have changed, or different specials, or they might make a different soup, or do a special salad, or whatever was in that CSA box kind of drove that agenda. But the other thing that we're able to do, which I think, depending on how you look at it, is either a limitation or quite the opposite, is it's forced us to really think of our menu much more seasonally than perhaps we did in the past, when you could buy, and you still can, you know, you can buy tomatoes 12 months out of the year. But the tomatoes you're buying in January are not the same as the ones you're buying in July.
No.
And that gives us the opportunity to design menu items that are really seasonally appropriate, whether it's using root vegetables in the wintertime, and really using them to their best effect, you know, beets and turnips and rutabagas, you know, whatnot. Or using fresh produce like tomatoes and salad greens and so on when they're seasonally appropriate. So I think when you are tapped into what's happening in the local farm scene, it really does force you to think more in terms of seasonal offerings. You know, you get this tiny little window of opportunity when the asparagus crop comes in, and if you're buying local asparagus, that window is about 2 weeks long, you know, and that's kind of cool, you know, to run specials that just it's so kind of ephemeral, you know, it's here and then it's not, you know, till next year. And yeah, so we really do enjoy kind of playing with those constraints.
Mm-hmm. And how about the brewer? Is the brewer involved in, say, local grain growers, local hops, any of that?
We were just having this conversation the other day. I was downstairs in the brewery talking to John Bergeron, our head brewer, and we were talking about locally produced hops. He's now buying hops from growers in upstate New York. This particular conversation started because I was asking him about a new hop supplier in Massachusetts. And we were talking about, it's a little bit of an analogy to what I was just saying about chicken, where you know, you can raise chickens anywhere. I mean, you can raise them on your fire escape in Brooklyn, I suppose. I think some people actually do. And the same thing with hops. They grow
anywhere.
Like weeds. They're just this crazy climbing vine that once they're established, they're kind of hard to kill. But to grow them of the quality for commercial production, and also to be able to process them, requires a sizable investment in capital equipment. You know, out in the Pacific Northwest, the hop harvest is only, you know, 3-4 weeks long, and yet they have these very elaborate machines that, you know, strip all the cones off the vines and separate them out and get them ready. You cannot do that by hand. And the thing that's allowed small hop producers to start to take root, if you will, in this part of the country, is a growing availability of the the ability to process hops on a commercial scale. And it's very exciting because growing, having access to hops from upstate New York or Maine or Massachusetts, and it's only a matter of time before we start seeing hop producers here in New Hampshire, is pretty swell. The same goes with malted barley. You can grow barley anywhere. In fact, a lot of farmers grow it as a cover crop in the winter, and then they just plow it under in the spring. But to actually have the capacity to do malting on a small scale that's still commercially viable, that's starting to happen more and more. So even though the bulk of our malt is still produced by one of the major suppliers, and we buy from several different ones, we can get a lot of really interesting specialty malts, and that makes it a lot more fun too. And on the scale we're producing at, and in a brew pub setting, we can afford to pay a little bit more for our raw materials because we're going straight to retail. We're brewing in small batches, and so having the ability to source raw materials locally is it's pretty fun. John's having a lot of fun with that.
I can imagine. What has been the reaction from the customers to this, or do they notice?
The ones that are interested and care to ask and find out, or you can certainly read on our menu description if we're serving, carrots from a particular local farm or heirloom tomatoes or whatever. People really like it because I think people are, especially in a place. I don't know if it's especially, but I was just going to say in a place like Portsmouth, where a lot of our guests are people who are visiting from somewhere else. So much in the same way that people come to coastal New England and they want to have lobsters because that's what you do when you're in coastal New England. I think a lot of people are very intrigued with the idea that they're able to enjoy, kind of the fruits of the land, if you will. Things that are grown locally that don't just come off the back of the truck of a big broadline vendor that you can get in anywhere USA. And so I think that more and more people are they're looking for that. They're seeking that out. Mm-hmm. So we're happy to be able to participate in that.
And looking forward over the next 3-4 years. How do you plan to develop further the farm to brew pub?
I think part of the challenge is to continue to cultivate relationships with local growers and to make the supply chain more dependable, so that their ability to produce and our needs are better aligned. As I started by saying, a lot of times we buy from local producers, and it sort of gets folded into the mix of the things that we buy from all of our different vendors, including the big broadline vendors, that go down to the Chelsea market every morning and load up with produce. And it would be nice to develop a more consistent supply chain, so that we could count on having locally produced items on one hand from our perspective as a buyer, and from their perspective, if they're going to commit to generating XYZ amount of whatever, butternut squash, right, heirloom tomatoes, that they actually have a dependable market for it. And I think that that's an opportunity, I think, that a lot of restaurants have who are interested in buying more locally. And I'm not sure what that's going to require. I keep hoping someone's going to ride in with the magic solution to it.
But I think it's just, like I said, I think what it really is just a matter of cultivating these relationships, and for both the producer and the end user to have a better sense of what their needs and capabilities are and get those better aligned.
The sense of community between you and the people that you're buying your produce from. I know in a number of high-end restaurants in New York go to farms in upstate and say, if you would grow these 4 different types of tomatoes, we will buy every freaking tomato you can grow.
Yep.
That type of relationship gets built. And I'm wondering how that would change the relationship between business, producer and restaurants or brew pubs.
I think for the most part that's a positive thing. I will throw in a cautionary note that neither the purchaser nor the producer wants to get too far out there and having
all the eggs in one basket.
Eggs in one basket.
Yep.
It's that old story they teach in business school about the pickle supplier contracting with Walmart and putting all their pickle eggs in the Walmart basket, and how it's a risky proposition if you get too far out there. I think everybody needs to have a bit of enough diversity to cushion themselves against some kind of unforeseen consequence. And as we've all lived through, unforeseen consequences can come out of the blue and really affect everybody. But I think you're right. I think that is how you begin with that conversation about what your needs are and what someone's capacity of producing is. Part of it too, less on a sort of supply chain level, but you were talking about community. Part of that establishment of relationships is really connecting the growers, the producers, with the people who are consuming those products. And we're very, very happy with the relationship we have with the person who grows all of our mushrooms.
Okay.
And he's hosted beer dinners here that feature his products, and we make sure that his name is on every item, on our menu that features his mushrooms, and we buy all different kind of mushrooms from him, it's been really, really a great experience to see his business develop and grow over the last 10 years or so that he's been really focusing on his wholesale business, and that's a really fun relationship because that whole world of mushrooms is really fascinating.
Yep.
It's pretty great.
What effect did the pandemic have on the relationship that you have with your produce producers?
It wasn't great, as you can imagine, and we all swam in the same waters, so our story really isn't unique. It just brought everything to a screeching halt, at least for a period of time. In March of 2020, we got the word from the governor's office that we had to close our doors to any walk-in business. So for about 2.5 months, we were limited to doing very, very small amounts of takeout business. And then, the business got sort of reopened incrementally over the course of the following year. And that had a really deleterious effect on everybody, all down the line. The growers were struggling to find buyers, or not so much to find buyers, but to shift gears and find other, because people still have to eat, So instead of getting their mushrooms on a sandwich or a burger, or on top of a steak here, they might want to buy them at the local vegetable stand or something. So that left a lot of local growers having to rethink their business models and how they were getting their products out into the market. And I think we're still, it's not that far in the rearview mirror. We're still all piecing that back together. Our business here is still not anywhere close to what it was before the pandemic. And I don't think it will be for probably years. So I suspect that, like I said, I think pretty much everybody could tell you a very similar story to ours. But we're doing the best we can.
What silver lining came out of the pandemic? Every trouble has an effect that can sometimes be a hidden good effect.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's one that a lot of people don't think to ask. Well, I'll tell you, it's funny. If it weren't for a very particular thing, I'd be looking out the window at this great outdoor dining area right in front of the building. Unfortunately, the city of Portsmouth had to do a lot of work on all the utilities here on Market Street. So the street's all dug up. They're waiting to repave it, and hopefully that'll happen this coming week, because everywhere else in town has outdoor dining. And we're feeling the pinch because everyone else has outdoor dining and ours is still in a holding pattern. But the bigger thing, though, is that I think, and truth be told, I was really skeptical when in that first summer of 2020, the city said, well, let's let restaurants put tables and chairs out in the street where there were parking spaces. And my first thought was, well, who would want to sit out in the street, in a parking space? Well, it turns out a lot of people want to do that. And once you've got it all set up, it creates a really different vibe in the city. And I think more importantly than that, culturally, it made the policymakers in a city like Portsmouth rethink the prioritization of automobiles on top of everything else. And what they discovered was, we can take 100 street parking spaces out of circulation and let restaurants run their businesses there, and it doesn't cause the economy to collapse. Because guess what? People who were going to park in those spaces, they're parking somewhere else, and there are plenty of other places. The city has a beautiful new garage that is still underutilized, and I think that for a long time, our culture, and I'll paint with a broad brush here and just say our culture in the United States has been so driven by the automobile.
Pun intended.
And so it's nice to see this sense of, we've got this amazing real estate here. Maybe we can think of something better to do with it rather than just let 2,500 pounds of steel sit there. I see that, and I understand from talking to people that same conversation is taking place in communities all over the place, and probably right in New York City where you are.
No doubt about it.
And I think that is a really positive step, because I don't think there's any turning back. I don't think that all of a sudden the city's going to say, "Nah, we want those parking spaces back," because I think people really like having their outdoor dining. I was totally wrong about that, I admit. I think people really like it. I like the way it makes the city feel. I'd feel much better if we had ours out there right now, but I know we will.
within a few weeks' time. That's the first silver lining I can think of. I could probably think of others, but I'm thinking of that one only because I'm looking at the street where we're sitting right now.
Yep.
And I think that's pretty cool because I think that's going to have bigger ramifications in terms of how we think of our cityscapes, so that's something that I think maybe would have happened eventually anyway. But I know that the pandemic put that change on the fast track. And made it happen like flipping the switch. It was pretty cool.
Super. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview. I've also had another interview with Pete. You can click on the banner above and go right to that. Also, don't forget to check out the playlist that I have for the beers from Portsmouth Brewing Company. I'm the Old Growler, hoping all of your beers meet expectations.